Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of Yumi Empathy. My name is Known Wells. This is episode 145 on Your Grief, Your Way with Shelby Forsythia. Shelby is the author of the new book, Your Grief, Your Way. It is out tomorrow, actually. It's a daily devotional guide for folks who are going through grief. And I'd wager a bet to say that we are all experiencing a certain level of grief right now, especially in the context of a global pandemic and being out of our comfort zones, right? And experiencing discomfort and grieving normalcy, right? It is a beautiful book. I had the opportunity to check it out, an advanced reader copy of Your Grief, Your Way, and it's beautiful. And it's a really beautiful sort of anchor in these times. I encourage you to check it out. You can grab it in the show notes for this episode at feelyhuman.co or at Shelby's website, shelbyforsythia.com. That's SHELBYFORSYTHIA.com. Check it out. So yeah, we talk about grief in this episode. We talk about vulnerability of putting our voices out into the world. We talk about the acknowledgement that grief is part of you and not something you fix. We talk about grief in the context of being present and so many other wonderful things. I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope you do too. Thank you for listening. Before we get to it though, I just want to remind you that you can support me and this podcast and the work that I am doing by leaving a rating and review for Yumi Empathy in Apple Podcasts. It really does help out the show. If you could do that, that would be wonderful. You can also go to feelyhuman.co and write for the journal or take my free workshop, Feely Human 101, or collab with me. I'm always looking for collaborators in art and other things, so reach out if you're interested in collaborating. So many things that you can do to support me and the show and be a part of this community, the growing Feely Human Collective. So thank you for being a part of it. And thank you for being here. I've been feeling very tired and angry too lately, and this show really anchors me and it brings me back to a place of balance and healing and just this upward momentum of growth, because I'm reminded that you all are listening. You are all on the other end, connecting with me, even though I don't see you or maybe even hear you, but you're there, and it makes me very happy that you're there. We're building a community of Feely Humans, and it just makes me so freaking grateful. So thank you. And speaking of your voice, I would love to hear from you, truly. Yumi Empathy has a voicemail. You can leave a voicemail for me. You can ask me a question, or if you have a musing on recent self-care or mental health, or you want to just do an emotional check-in and I can respond and play it on the show, you can do that. The number is 949-346-4563. That's 949-346-4563. Call in, leave me a message. I would love to hear from you because you're the best. Check out the Feely Human shop. You can do that at feelyhuman.co/shop. There's lots of cool pins and t-shirts and stickers and a new empathy zine for kids. It's adorable, and a new sticker from Bella Roskigno, who's an artist. It's called The People Pleaser. It's beautiful, and more soon coming to the shop. So check that out, feelyhuman.co shop rather, and follow me and this podcast and the Feel Human Collective on Instagram at feelyhuman, at Yumi Empathy. We're also on Facebook, Feel Human Collective, Yumi Empathy. And Black Lives Matter, everyone. Breonna Taylor did not get the justice she deserves, and we need to keep fighting for equity for our BIPOC friends and family members and communities, because what is happening in that area is brutally unjust and unfair and not right. And we need to do better. So keep talking, keep having conversations, keep marching, keep fighting, keep talking about it with your communities. Okay, I think that about does it. Again, thank you for being here. I love you so much. This is episode 145 on Your Grief, Your Way with Shelby Forsythia. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights, and the darks we face as humans, trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight, so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. Yumi Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I am Charlie Brown, but only in the good grief kind of way, and maybe that adorable striped shirt, because I'm here with certified grief recovery specialist, podcaster, and author of the new book, Your Grief, Your Way. It's Shelby Forsythia. Hello, Shelby.
I know, and it's good to be here with you.
Did I butcher your last name?
I get Forsythia. Forsythia is how I pronounce it, but I know it's a flower that exists in nature, so there's lots of ways to pronounce it.
Ooh, that's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful last name. I do really like it. It's fun to say. I like to look at it.
I did it myself. Yeah. Well, my given name is Forsyth, but my father planted Forsythia in our yard growing up. And I remember very distinctly one day, I think I was about 8. My sister would have had to have been 6, and he was planting a Forsythia bush in our yard. And he turned to us and said, "Now, girls, this is our flower because it's got our name in it." And I decided in that moment, and then several times at different points in my life, that if I ever was going to write or to do anything with a public persona, I would add that to my last name because it's a treasured memory that I have.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I love that. That's amazing. Well, thank you for being here, friend.
Thank you so much. Well, and I know a couple of years back now, you were on my podcast coming back, so you and I have just been in each other's orbit ever since.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I have fond memories of that experience. So thank you for it's good to connect with you again.
Yeah, and I love everything you're doing with Feely Humans. I love even just the phrase of Feely Human. I was like, oh, I know exactly what that is. I'm one of those.
I'm always, well, Well, I started, it's funny because I started calling the listeners of You, Me, Empathy Feely Humans, and that's kind of where it came from. And it's always nice to hear when someone like yourself says, "Yep, I know exactly what that means."
Yeah.
Feels good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do an emotional check-in. How are you feeling in your body? How are you feeling right now?
Sometimes if I have difficulty naming actual emotions, I'll like name a sensation. So like right now I have like a boulder on a really thick rope kind of anchored at the base of my spine. I feel like tethered to something, like tethered to the core of the earth or to the universe. So there's like a groundedness in that. Um, but it's almost like when you let like fishing line out, there's also a lot of room to float away, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
And I know before we got on the mic, I think the two words I chose for today were simultaneously overwhelmed. Overwhelmed is a feeling for me that perpetually exists kind of all the time. If I have pockets where I'm not overwhelmed, it's pretty remarkable to me. But the reasons for the overwhelm always change. Um, and then anxiety in the sense of anticipation. We talk about anticipatory grief in the grief space, but now I have like anticipatory anxiety where I'm anticipating the anxiety of the launch day for the book. We're recording this on September 23rd. The book comes out in 6 days. So it's like, holy cow. How will this change my life, if at all? How will people receive it? What's going to happen? There's really, once it's released into the world, quote unquote, officially, it's like all bets are off. Anything could happen.
Yeah. What do you think can happen?
Well, the first thing that always comes to my mind, the thing I come to first as a creator is like 1-star reviews. There's always this this fear as a creative person who puts work into the world that somebody's going to hate it or not resonate with it or find one particular flaw and not leave it alone. And I think that's always a fear I've had perpetually as a person who makes things. I've been an artist, I mean, since I was 3, 4, 5, I was plunking around on the piano, but that moved into piano recitals and I did fine art and I've done vocal performance and now being a writer and a podcaster and stuff. And there's always this fear of being received by the masses and what that reception will look like. Is it a warm welcome or is it a cold welcome? And so that's always, my worst fear. But then on a grander scale, I remember with my first book, Permission to Grieve, I started sending it out to different outlets and spiritual masters and people who've inspired me for years and years. And I actually got to sit in front of or beside, literally, physically, with authors and teachers that I've admired. I mean, sometimes for over a decade because that book existed in the world. Like it opened up a door that I didn't even know I had access to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a possibility also. So it's very like swingy pendulum, very far end. People could absolutely hate it. And then very opposite end is like, it could put me in places that I didn't even know were in my scope of possibility or reality to make happen. And then everything in between too. And so you never know. I mean, even with podcasts like this one, who's listening, who's out there, who will stumble upon it. And there's some kind of magic in that uncertainty, which is fun to play with and fun to think about. And then there's also kind of an ominous threat embedded in there too. It's like, I don't really know what happens next. And I think so much of the work of being a creative person, especially when it comes to writing in the grief space, is just throw it out there and see what happens. I'm literally challenging myself to take risks with my work all the time and hoping that the piece of my heart that I shave off like a slice of turkey and serve on a plate, somebody recognizes it and says, hey, I have that too. Instead of, that's awful. Where did you get it? Put that back. We don't want that here. Whatever possible response you could have to that. Because while I won't compare books or other creative projects to children, because I think the loss of children is very different than the loss of a creative work, it is a piece of myself that I am giving up in some kind of offering or service to the world. And so there's always a bit of trepidation about, all right, here we go. We're about to chuck it out the window and hope that somebody out there catches it, loves it, nurtures it, is inspired by it, resonates with it. And I think, I mean, to go even farther than this, I don't want to take too long on this question, but it resonates with this deep human question too of, do I belong here? Am I wanted in the world? Do the people I'm surrounded by, wherever they exist on the planet, especially right now in coronavirus when we can't see each other, do they want me? Do they love me? Do they appreciate me? Do I matter to anyone? And so all of those questions come forward too when putting anything into the world, but I think especially a book.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
I mean, and what I mean by that, I'd imagine many creators, I mean, I can relate to that deeply. I wonder for you, Shelby, what amount of effort are you trying to master or put into the sort of like, this is my thing and I'm proud of what my thing is, and regardless of what people say, I'm proud of my thing?
Oh, I like that question a lot. I have to, it's very funny. I feel like I have to talk myself off a ledge every day, like every morning. I have a very pretty religious, it's not God related, but a religious practice of writing or journaling for myself and nobody else in the morning for 45 minutes. I literally set a timer and whatever comes out, comes out. And I just finished reading a book by Tasha Silver. She does remarkable work on like surrendering things to the universe. You don't have to carry them around anymore, which is enormously helpful to my brain. Because if I could, I would just carry everything around all the time. Because my story's like, I can handle it. In reality, I really can't. And she proposes this idea in her book of a God box or a universe box. And so you write all these worries you have or anxieties you have or things you're afraid of on pieces of paper and put them in the box, and they are now God's problem. They're not yours. And God I'm using very loosely because I don't have a belief in like an organized religion or even a Christian faith anymore since the death of my mother. But I like this idea of surrendering ideas or worries or fears to something that's not me. I'm like, this is bigger than me, and so I'm going to pass the buck to somebody with a higher pay grade. So I don't have to deal with this anymore. And when I release, I have to do it over and over again. So I don't just release a fear once and then it's magically gone. It's like every single morning, I'm like, I'm afraid nobody's going to like it. I'm afraid somebody's going to say something bad about it. I'm afraid that this is going to be the end of the line for me as a creator, which of course none of these things are ultimately 1,000% true. Getting rid of all of those or even putting them somewhere for the day. It's like, okay, I've addressed all the fears. What remains? Like what are the crumbs that are left in the journal? It's like, and actually I'm really excited for this thing to come out. Or look how much progress I've made even since my first book, which only came out a year ago. Or look at the positive impact it's already had on people who got advanced copies of it. Or even right now, I'm entertaining the idea of a third book. Like a third book has already arrived. And I'm like, look at this next thing that already needs to be out in the world. And it's able to be here because I finished the second work. And so it's not an ignorance of the negative to focus on the positive. It's an acknowledgement of the negative. So I can focus on the positive or even be willing to embrace it, because sometimes I feel like I build up my own brick wall of negativity so I can't possibly access things that are good. And so like every morning I have to dismantle this brick wall of negative thoughts and fears and anxieties and worries so that I can access the positivity that I know exists, or the pride that you speak of. I'm so proud of myself for putting this thing into the world. Like, holy cow, I wrote a book in the first 2 months of a pandemic, and 50,000 words in 2 months. I was under such a strict deadline, and it's incredible and astounding to me. And I know those things are intellectually true, but to access the emotional truth of it, of wow, that's amazing. I'm so proud of myself. I can't believe I accomplished that. I wish my mom could see me right now, and kind of self-honoring in that way. It's like I have to get everything else out of the way. I got to clean my glasses.
That's beautifully said. So here's an interesting anecdote. When I launched Feely Human in May, it was about 9-10 months of work and effort to get there. There was a lot to it. and a lot of, new stuff, and a lot of challenging myself, and a lot of like, I got to think like a business person, like all these new things that I had never really brought into my noggin before. And when I launched it, very proud, of course, and very excited. And yet I felt this tremendous like grieving period when I launched it. Like it was like a, my therapist actually compared it to like postpartum depression or something. Like I have this thing, it's living inside my head, right? I know what it is. It's mine. I'm building it. I'm shaping it, all this stuff. And it's mine. And then I relinquish it to the world, and then it's theirs, which is the goal, right? But then it's also, like you said, we open it up for criticism. We open it up for a reshaping, right? That could run away from us. And then we have to run after it and catch it and reshape it again, or whatever it may be. And and that's, I think, like that is the creative's, foil in a way. Like that's part of that journey. And I think what I've been trying to do in all of my work since, and with Feeling Human still, is just be like, what I can control is the happiness with what I'm doing now, and how proud am I in that thing that I'm building now, and holding on to like, this is the why, right? And you holding on to like, this is the why that I'm creating this book, to like help people through their grief. And that is something I'm holding on to. And the other stuff, is what it is. It's out of my control. And like me, as being like someone who has anxiety like you, like I just want to like, hey, I'm going to be present. I'm not going to think about that future stuff, right? I mean, that is where I'm trying to get to really every day. But it's a challenge. It's hard.
Well, and I think for me, I have to continue to relinquish the false idea that I think I got from society or movies or wherever we get these ideas that a big accomplishment is going to make me big happy. Like those things are parallel. And so putting another book into the world should make me very, very happy. Like that expectation I have to surrender and let go of. Sometimes that's true, but I had a really similar experience to yours, like postpartum book depression after I released my first book, Permission to Grieve. Like this was the dream of a lifetime. I've been wanting to be an author since I was 5. And I put a book into the world. I made it manifest. It lived out there. I self-published it, so I didn't even go like a traditional route. And so there's a lot more grit and legwork involved with it. And after it came out, I was enormously low. And I was like, why? You just accomplished, this huge thing you've been scheming of for, I don't know, 22 years of your life on and off. And so kind of this go round, and I think COVID has humbled me a lot in terms of expectations in general. Is allowing that dream or that expectation to not belong to me. And so I kind of have to tell myself, I'm like, this is a book launch. It's going to go how it's going to go. And that's a very neutral statement. And so this could go really, really well, really poorly, anywhere in between. And also I'm finding too, that some of my greatest moments of presence, or what I would refer to as like a deep, like a solar plexus joy that like lives in my belly or like behind my sternum, are in moments. I mean, like literally last night, I joined an online writers group for the first time in I don't know, 7 or 8 months, to start working on a different writing project. And I saw other humans who were doing the same work that I was doing. And we shared all of our own insecurities and exactly what we were here to write on. And then we wrote in silence for 50 minutes on Zoom. And then we came back and reported what we had done and all kind of congratulated each other on having this experience. And these are meetings that happen, I don't know, 5 times a day, 7 days a week, all over the world for free as part of this program. It's called Shut Up and Write, if anybody wants to join it. But in that 50 minutes of writing and uniting with these other people who are writing whatever they're writing all over the world, I was like, this is this is a great well of joy to me. And no, I mean, aside from us saying hello on Zoom for 10 minutes, like nobody's watching me do it. I'm not, creating anything with anything hanging over my shoulder. It's like I'm literally sitting in this space. It feels very reminiscent of when I used to paint and I would sit at an easel alone in a room and get lost in that space in my brain. Yeah, it was really beautiful. And when I shut down my computer for the night, I kind of sat back and took a deep breath and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going for. So like if I can fill my life with as much of that as I can, like that feeling, not even that activity, because sometimes doing the same activities won't create that sense of presence. But if I can grip onto as much of that feeling as I can, I think it will be a good life. That would probably be my definition of a good life.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that anecdote, and it sounds like a great group. It seems to be like it has to do with, or maybe for me, it just has to do with like what we can control, right? Like, whether it's you writing your book or me creating Feel a Human or whatever, you making your thing, it's like in the making of that thing is like where we can be present and where we can get that enrichment and that joy. And then when we put it out into the world, we make the thing, it's someone else's in a way, right? And maybe looking at it that way can be helpful for others, is like thinking about it like, in the making process, it's ours, it's what we want. It's, being present in that making of it, in that joy. And then it's not yours, because you made it for someone else anyways, right? You made it to, made it to help people through their grief, or you made it to help people through their mental health struggles, whatever it may be,
Yeah, well, and I appreciate you saying that too, because I don't, contrary to, I think, what drives a lot of grieving people to eventually write books, I actually don't write my books for other people. Um, I I heard this quote, or I read this quote from Elizabeth Gilbert once of like, if you're creating something to help me, please don't. Please don't try to help me through your work. And so so often the person that I write for or in honor of is the person that I was when my mom died when I was 21. And so these lessons that I'm learning, the observations I'm seeing, the things that I'm writing down and taking note of, and then eventually sharing are like, this is what I wish I had. If it's helpful to you, great. But also if it's not, it's not really 100% for you either. It's very much a inner child healing work, except that my inner child is 21. It's not like a 5-year-old. But
right.
Even then, there's some healing of that 5-year-old self too, of like, you're just allowed to be creative for creativity's sake. You don't have to always sell it or wrap a business around it, or kind of whatever else the world pressures you to do. Oh, you should put your stuff on Etsy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. I just I just want to write to be able to write things. So there's a lot of healing work that comes from it. And I also know, and this is often a strange thing to admit, I don't say this on every podcast, but I sense that there is some kind of deep mission or work or calling inside of me. Like, if I don't do this, I will die. And it's not a threat. It's not like some part of me would die. I think I would not feel like it was a full life if I didn't get to write about the very worst thing that happened to me and how I survived. I think this is my very best way to process it. Of course, I have a therapist and, learned Reiki and grief recovery and all these other modalities that are helpful, but to write about it, I'm like, this is, I feel very lucky to have a calling, is I think how I'll phrase that.
I feel that. And it does feel great, and I feel the same way. Like, if I didn't do the things that I do with Feel the Human and this podcast, I would feel empty. I would feel like not complete in the way that I do. And it's why I keep doing it, because it is so tremendously fulfilling. When you were talking there, Shelby, I was thinking about, I was listening, but what it made me think about was grief in context of presence and being present. We're talking about presence and the importance of that in our creativity and how we make things. Like how does that coincide with grief and the grieving process, right? Because it's interesting, because grief can be, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the grief specialist. Grief can be a thing of looking back, right? It's a thing of like maybe holding on to what was in the past or whatever it may be, however we process it. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about presence and grief and how those things overlap?
Yeah, that's a marvelous question. Nobody's ever posed it to me quite like that, and I really love it. And even right now, the phrase that's coming to me is, "Are you willing to see yourself?"
Mm.
And this goes for creativity, but also very much goes for grief, because we're taught not to. We're taught that it's the right thing to do to look away from our own selves when we're grieving. And this is getting a little woo-woo floaty. But what I mean by this is...
I'm here for it.
Okay, great. What I mean by this, and this is an illustration I used in my first book, is that we have these voices or these natural human responses to grief. We have sadness, we have anxiety, we have rumination, we have nostalgia, we have rage, we have numbness, we have all of these expressions, different facets of ourselves that want to come to the surface and have a voice and be seen and known, sometimes embraced, held, expressed, belong in the company of others. Like they all kind of each want different things at different times. But so much of, especially what westernized society teaches, is that's not appropriate, or that they're not allowed, or that they make you crazy or unwelcome or kind of castaway. I get this visual of like a person standing alone on a deserted island while the rest of society is, having a party on a cruise ship. And to be anything in the category of grief is to be ostracized or deserted by society. And so much of doing grief work, whether you're doing it by yourself or in some kind of grief support group, is how much of yourself are you willing to see? Are you willing to see the parts that society has told you it's bad to or wrong to, or that you're not allowed to because we internalize so much of that? I genuinely believed after my mom died, if I fully acknowledged the extent of the pain that I was going through, I was going to have a mental episode breakdown and be committed for the rest of my life. And so I literally put off, like hitting the snooze button on an alarm clock, grief for 2.5 years after she died. I would have these times where I would speak to relatives and I would cry and I would acknowledge her death and I would be angry about it. Of course, like these emotions were present, but I didn't fully allow like the dam to burst for 2.5 years. And when I did, it only took like a half hour, but I essentially threw a tantrum in my apartment and like was banging the floor and playing screamo music and just literally collapsing into whatever emotion wanted to arrive, because I was just so exhausted with holding everything back and being unwilling to see myself, that when I finally was finished with that emotional experience and was shifting into a different emotional space, I like observed what had just happened and I was like, oh my God, I didn't die. And it was revolutionary to me because I thought surely I would. I was very convinced that my mother's death and feeling the entirety of it and expressing it through my body, through emotions and physical actions, was going to be the end of Shelby as I knew it. And so to allow that to happen and then to see myself in it, I was like, oh my God. And in this reassurance that not only did you not die and you're not crazy, it's wow, you have so much room for this than you thought you did. Like there's so much more space in you to hold the experience of grief and all the wild emotions that come with it than you think at the onset. And it's so strange. I'm smiling right now because discovering that, it was like I'd stumbled across some kind of secret. Yeah. Like society doesn't want you to know that you can actually handle grief. Society doesn't want you to know that it's not bad to cry or bang your fist on the floor so loud that your neighbors need to call the cops, or just to wail. Gosh, I was so afraid of vocally expressing grief too, because I thought somebody would think I'd lost my mind. And now I'm kind of like, well, I've lost something.
Right.
And I'm allowing that to be true. But then there's also a coming back to, I don't know, if like a homeostasis of myself. You can't yell all the time or wail all the time. Like our bodies literally aren't designed to do that. And so at some point we stop, just like crying. It's impossible, like literally impossible to cry forever. But yeah, so much of grief that I return to, especially with clients, is like, how much of yourself are you actually willing to see as you are grieving? There's being witnessed by others, which is tremendously powerful, but then there's a self witnessing also that's enormously powerful.
Yeah, I love that. That's so well said, and a really beautiful example of the type of presence I think I was getting at. You talk about like society not allowing for that, or maybe shaming us for that piece of it, right? Whether it's crying or grieving out loud, or banging our fists, whatever it may be, however we grieve. But it's also like it's this deeper societal thing of like all these boxes, right? That we want to put ourselves in, or these frames of thinking that are that we just kind of fall into because we grow up in a certain way, or we grow up in a certain culture, or women have to be this way, men have to be this way. It's all sort of like tied into this like really oppression to like get us out of looking at ourselves and being who we are and getting comfortable with that, right? There's so much distraction from that. And to hear you say that like grief is, that's an integral part of grief just makes me happy, because it's, I think of that looking at ourselves as an integral part of just self-actualization and knowing and healing, and healing our mental health and all that stuff. It's like looking at ourselves is where it needs to happen, where it needs to start at least.
Yeah. Well, and something that I love that you mentioned is that there's multiple lenses to this. And so there's gender, there's culture, there's age, how much grief is appropriate for your age. There's relationship to the person that you lost. Society's like, you can certainly grieve a mother, you can't grieve a pet. And so it varies based on what you lost. But then too, the thing I'm noticing more and more often, and I'm sure this will resonate with you and your listeners too, is grief as non-productive. It does not fit into our society's definitions of like what is worth something, because you're not making any money by grieving. Right. You're not being efficient by grieving. And one of the most beautiful pieces of art that I've ever seen. Gosh, I wish I could remember the artist, but I bought a lino cut of one of her prints because it impacted me so much. It's this woman with her knees to her chest, and there's a plant in the room staring out a bedroom window. And on the window pane, it has printed, "Grief is a worthwhile use of your time." And I was like, whoa, because that was mind blowing to me. And embracing that, oh my gosh, because grieving actually gives you a lot more. I mean, talking back to the theme of presence, like you are able to be much more present when that little grief siren isn't constantly going off in the back of your head of like, I'm still here, I'm still here. Why haven't you addressed me? What's going on? I'm ready to arrive. And you're like, nope, 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 nope. And there's societal oppression of grief, but then there's like a self-oppression of grief.
Yeah.
And to allow grief to show up and to use our time to express grief, however it needs to be released. Yeah, we fight back against that norm that productivity is the only thing of value.
Do you think it's ultimately connected to this idea that as a collective, we seem to be uncomfortable with feelings?
Oh, sure. 1,000%. Yeah. I think it's because feelings have no right answer. It's not something that's linear. It's not a call and response.
Binary box checking society that is oppressed upon us.
Well, right. So we know what to do. Say, if your car breaks down, like you call AAA or take it to a mechanic or call a tow truck. Like you know what to do if something like that happens. But when somebody's sad, it's like, okay, how do I respond to this? Because there's so many different options and there's not one right answer or a handful of right answers. It's really very, it's unpredictable. And I think our society is scared of unpredictability, uncertainty, unknown. So anything that's not that is like, we just won't, we just won't deal with that. Because we don't have an answer to it. And even grief in some ways has been, I hesitate to say pathologized, but society, especially religion, thinks that there are correct answers to grief of, don't cry, they're in a better place, or just keep busy, or time heals all. Like, even these cliches are society's attempts at having a right answer to grief.
Right.
When in reality, it's like, there's really not a right answer. Yeah. Uncomfortability with feelings, but also the ambiguity of, what do I do with this?
Right.
Where does it belong? Yeah. We don't know how to have an experience. We know how to find an answer as a society.
Yeah. And that is really the work that I think both of us are doing, is in creating a space and showing that it's okay and safe, maybe uncomfortable, maybe difficult, but ultimately so enriching and beautiful, a space for just sitting with and being okay with the wonder and not the uncertainty and the gray and the non-binary. It's really about ultimately breaking all of that structure down and allowing for the healing.
I love that you use the word wonder. That's one of my favorite words.
It's a good word.
It's a good word. Well, because I get this sense sometimes with my own grief, but especially when I work with clients in workshops or even one-on-one, and I don't say the sentiment out loud, but I'm like, look at how much more of you there is to be explored, but also that just exists under the surface, beyond who you think you are and who society likes to peg you as. Like, look how much more of you exists, how much more depth you have, how much more width and emotional bandwidth and breadth and experience and wisdom even. And there is, for me at least, doing this work of grief, I found it in myself first. So I had this wonder that I was like, oh my God, look how much more of me there is as a human. After the death of my mother. And it wasn't immediate. At first I was pissed for a long time. And then this has been something that's continued to grow. But as I work with clients, I'm like, wow, look how much you know without even knowing it. Look how much you feel without even feeling it. Look how much you understand without even totally understanding it. And those aren't bad things. They're just like, wow, look how much there is here. And there is a wonder in that we are so much more. And you know this too, we're so much more than the jobs that we have, or the people that we marry, or the gender identification in our license cards, or how old we are, or where in the world we live. We are so much more than all of those things. And I think grief is a really phenomenal and humbling reminder of that.
Indeed. Do you have I'm wondering if you could describe for me what the feeling of grief is for yourself.
Grief for me, I'm going to return to the solar plexus again, because that's the place for me, at least, where I feel like it entered and continues to live in my body. As I was grieving the death of my mother, I had locked myself in the cab of my dad's truck that was parked and off in the garage, but it was the only place I felt safe to go and yell without any member of my family like freaking out on me. And as I was mourning her death, I literally felt something behind my solar plexus crack, like break. And I knew I didn't break any bones or anything like that, but it felt as if that was reality. And so when I think about grief now, that's where all of that lives. But the feeling of grief for me goes beyond sad. I think people think grief and they think despair, depression, sadness, longing, which are, yes, part of grief, but gosh. Okay, here's the best visual that I can come up with in this moment right now, is that grief is like this giant, spherical, multifaceted, multi-angular, like a globe gem. And I can turn it or it rotates by itself. I really am not the person in charge of my grief. Grief is a part of me, but I'm not I'm not the boss of grief. It rotates constantly in my solar plexus and kind of tilts towards different emotions or different experiences or different memories, like a gyroscope almost. And so its center of gravity is always changing. And sometimes it tilts toward, wow, holy cow, my mom always wanted to be a writer, and now I'm putting a second book into the world, the fulfillment of a dream, and the only reason it exists is because she's not here. And so there's like this soaring joy, and then there's always the weight of the fact that she died. And there's other griefs that I've experienced too that live in here. But sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's despair, sometimes it's numbness, sometimes it's sadness, sometimes it's rage. And it's like this big gemstone is constantly rotating to reveal different sides of itself that I haven't seen before. And so the older I get and the more I continue to study grief, it's like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was a part of grief. And so I get to respond to that too. And I think a lot of the work that I do, especially in this new book, Your Grief, Your Way, is dispelling the myth that grief is just sad, because it is so much deeper and wider and even bigger than that. But it's definitely something that is inside of me. I think people, oftentimes grief support programs will compare grief to like a backpack or something that's outside of you. And for me, it feels as if something I have consumed. It is literally inside of me and cannot be removed. Yeah, that's the best visual I have in that moment. But that one made me think.
I appreciate your attempt at it, and I think I believe it came up in me to ask you that because my sense of grief. So just to share, I haven't lost a mother or a father. I haven't lost anyone in my direct family. I really haven't had other than uncles and things like that. And when I talk to people about grief and others like Elisa or Rebecca Sofer of Modern Loss, like people I've had on this podcast about grief, my sense is that it is like this supremely unique, amorphous blob, right? That is
That's beautiful,
right. That is always
very true,
right. That is always like kind of surprising us and amazing us, right? And is connected to the wonder and is connected to like all these feelings. And, and when I think about like my mental health, right, a lot of it is in a lot of my journey of healing is in looking and trying to be curious and knowing and feeling and learning to like know what hurts and where it hurts, right? And with grief, it feels like an even harder task in some ways because like you're dealing with your own things, but it's connected to this deep loss of this person in your life or this thing in your life, and it's like it's this other layer of, I don't know, like transporting your grief through the cosmos or something. And it's like this, it just seems real difficult is what I'm trying to say ultimately.
Yeah. Well, and I think I'll softly substitute that in my own experience with complex. Because I think at first it seemed difficult because I thought I had to understand it all at once. And that was an expectation or like a pressure that I put on myself and sometimes still do. Every now and then someone tries to call me a grief expert. I'm like, please don't do that. And it's why I continue to call myself a student of grief, which I think is why I admire your work so much, because there's this air of study that continues to permeate what you do and really permeates me and my grief. But yeah, this amorphous blob. I think part of grief is knowing that grief will never be known fully. I use this visualization with some of my clients sometimes, and I also host like a 12-week online course. And the last piece of it is how do we incorporate grief into the full picture of our life? And I frame it for clients as a long-term relationship. Like you are married to this experience and cannot be divorced from it. Because once grief happens in your life, even if it changes, even if it fades, even if it matures, even if it comes to a place where you feel like you're no longer in anguish about what happened, grief is still a very, very much a part of what happened to you and part of your story. And it can't be like excised or extricated from you like a bad tooth or something like that. It is something, grief literally composes your taste buds now. It informs how you absorb the entirety of your life. And so seeing grief as a long-term partner, sometimes there are seasons of great loss and despair. Sometimes there are seasons of plenty, of wealth, of harvest, of joy. But to weather both of those with grief in tow and to continue to study grief as a partner, as a force, as an informant of like, okay, what are we going to do now? Yeah, I think it's the great work of my life to look at grief and to study it in that way. And I talk so much about the death of my mother, but even knowing that I'm carrying grief with me has helped me understand or make sense of or add meaning to the sudden loss of an engagement or not achieving a dream that I really, really, really wanted, or the death of a pet, or the remarriage of my father to a new woman, or the loss of major friend groups, or even now in COVID-19, the gem is turning. I am learning new facets of grief, like full body loneliness of not being touched for 6 months, not being hugged or embraced or accompanied in that way. There are new kinds of grief appearing all the time. And I think so many people are realizing that with COVID, there's this ambiguous or disenfranchised loss of griefs that you can't grieve because nothing physical was lost.
Yeah.
So there's, the loss of a job, there's financial hardship, there's loss of certainty or hopes, plans, dreams, expectations for the future. But how do you grieve those things if you could never have touched them in the first place? And so how does that go? Where does that go? And so I feel like I'm perpetually poking this turning gem with a stick, being like, what the hell is this? and constantly trying to uncover, like, what is this thing? And sometimes it's a very intense pursuit of knowledge. And sometimes I sit back, I'm like, well, you tell me, you show me, and I'll just be here waiting because I really have no other choice. I can't step away from grief. So sometimes I allow myself to watch it unfold and maybe let me know later some vocabulary or some framing for how it would like to be known. And other times I'm like, okay, I'm going to find a book about this or a podcast about this or somebody else who's had this loss so they can tell me what I'm feeling right now. This a long-term relationship with an amorphous blob. That's grief.
The long-term piece of it is like, how did you come to that realization? And when you did, was it overwhelming? Because you think about it and like you're talking about like having that, and teaching that in your class or your workshop and saying, hey guys, this is with you now. Like hearing that or feeling that for the first time has got to be like, oh boy, I got a life ahead of me.
Oh, terrifying for a lot of people. And that's very much something that I acknowledge. So thank you for asking that question too, because it's not like, here you go, you're with it forever. Bye.
Right.
And I think it's only really a threat to people or a genuine fear if they believe that their grief is bad and that it will be bad forever, like at this intensity level of bad. But if you reframe grief, as I have reframed grief, as so many others have reframed grief before me, as whatever happens after a loss, and that is inclusive of the entire emotional spectrum and the waves of intensity, then it's a lot easier to relax the shoulders, open up the rib cage, put your feet on the ground. Because, and Sheryl Sandberg talks about this in her book Option B, that there are 3 main fears. Hello, Gigi. We're getting some visitation from the cat. There are 3 big fears that grieving people often have, but the primary of which is it will be like this forever. Because loss is so permanent, especially if we're talking about death of a loved one, that it is assumed that everything that comes after loss will be permanent as well. And our brains are wired to think that way. It's not any fault of our own that we can't get out of that pattern of thinking. But proving to ourselves every single day through whatever means that what we're doing today is just a little bit different than what happened yesterday, or who we're interacting with is just a little bit different than who we interacted with yesterday, or the things that we're doing, or the news that's coming out in the world, or what we're seeing on our social media feed, any proof that we can find that what's happening today is different than it was yesterday is evidence that that can be true for your grief as well. And when we understand and recognize that, even if you go through, a month, 6 months, I went through 2.5 years of essentially grief being this heavy, unending, burdensome thing that I did not want in my life. Eventually, I landed in this place where I was like, okay, something is shifting, something is changing. And even now, looking back those 2.5 years, there were times or days where I felt more numb than I did sad. And that's like a fuzzy distinguishment for somebody who just feels like garbage all the time. But like when you can start to, I don't know if I can put a metaphor to this, but like get into the control room and turn the dial knobs and really see how things are subtly changing every day. It's like, okay, maybe this will not be exactly like this forever. It's impossible for it to be. People are like, how do I survive life after loss? I'm like, you're already doing it. Like just by being alive after a loss that's happened. And of course, I know there are things like coping mechanisms, and I don't want this to feel so bad or so heavy or so dark all the time. And I get into a lot of that in my work and even in this new book. But when I told myself, or when I came to the recognition that this is going to be lifelong, it was like I got to breathe again because I didn't have to deal with the pressure of trying to fix my grief. Like when you acknowledge it's going to be there forever, it's like, oh, I can stop fighting it.
Yeah.
I can stop trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to think of a visualization or a metaphor for this, and I can't come up with one at the moment. But like when I realized that grief was going to be a long-term thing, and it was going to look a lot of different ways. Like, of course, grief in 40 years looks a lot different than the day after it happens. And what you think and what you believe to be true about it, and the losses you've experienced since will look very different. Once I realized that, I was like, oh, I can stop trying to make this any different than what it is.
Yeah.
I allowed it to stay.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that so much. I wonder if you've gotten this, in my own life. I've gotten some feedback. Let's just call it feedback from certain.
Okay, I'm nervous about this already.
certain familial characters in my life. Feedback around the work I do, and commentary being that I'm just wallowing in darkness, right? And my simple response to that is, you're not inside the control room. You're not looking at the thing. You're not. I'm here because I'm curious. I'm here because I want to learn and I want to understand, and I want to go back to these dark places. I want to go back to these childhood traumas or my loss of my mother, right? Because I want to understand. I want to see how this shapes me. It has shaped me. It's already shaped me. I want to look at it, right? I want to be curious about it. We talked about presence, right? That's not wallowing. That is growing, right? That is beauty. And yet I think a certain person, I think many people probably, I'm sure you've gotten this, sees you as someone who's like, oh, can't you just give up? Your mom died whatever many years ago, just move on. Or is grief your thing now, right? Or is depression your thing now? Is childhood trauma your thing now? Is like, yeah, maybe it is. But it's ever changing, and that's the point, right? That we have to look at it to know that, and to mine it, right? I wonder if you can feel that or relate to that a bit.
Yeah, I love the word mine. We're coming up with a lot of really good words in this. Yeah, I think I've been fortunate in that I don't have a lot of family that's intent on telling me there's something wrong with my work or what I do. I think if anything, that bullying comes from me.
Mm.
And so, am I wallowing? Is there something wrong with me that I've turned the worst thing that ever happened to me into my life's work? Is that pathological? Should I be checked out somewhere? Is often even a story that I tell myself. And I think this is hard to exactly put into words because I don't want to misconstrue the value of intuition, but I think there's a difference between feeling and knowing, in the sense that there's a difference between being inside of an experience and observing the experience. And sometimes you can do both at the same time. You can be inside of a grief experience and also kind of have a self that hovers outside and be like, wow, the human's really upset that she saw someone who looked like her mom in the supermarket. And I use this in my work. I call it the friendly anthropologist, where you literally study yourself and you use neutral words like that's interesting or that's fascinating, the human XYZ, and you talk about something that you've done, and you can actually see patterns in your grief when you study yourself as a grieving person. But how do I know I'm not still wallowing? And why is there something wrong with wallowing is really what I want to know.
Yeah.
I think wallowing implies some kind of sense of stuckness,
Yeah.
or even like a self-pity or a self-hatred. And I don't know that those are present in every day of my work, which is kind of how I know it's not wallowing.
Yeah.
I also will say one of the very first episodes of Coming Back I ever did was called 30 Days of Epic Wallowing, with this woman who had just gotten divorced. And she's like, I committed to wallowing and it was great. So I think there's definitely some value in like a good wallow, especially on a grief anniversary or
Hell yeah.
like Valentine's Day if you've lost a spouse and it's just garbage, and any other day where you're like, sometimes I just need an epic wallow and I love it. But also, okay, so here's how I know I'm not constantly wallowing, is because I cannot create from that place. Creativity does not live where wallowing lives.
Right.
They're not next door neighbors. They're not even in the same city in my mind. And so to do the work that I do, I have to be in a space where I can observe. And it's not cold. It's not cold observation microscopy. It's a very warm watching that happens. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be somebody's life work, doesn't it? Mental health, death. Somebody else is out there studying it too.
Hell yeah. I mean, I
think to not would be to fail to study humanity.
100%. I think it's the gifts that we can give each other.
Awful. Yeah.
Yeah. You experience this tremendous loss and this experience of immense grief and trauma, right? I believe it is the greatest gift that we can give each other, to like take that experience and to say, hey, I'm going to mine this. I'm going to explore this. I'm going to be curious about this for myself and look at the impact that has on others. I'm going to write these books, right? And I'm going to create this podcast. I'm going to create this safe space for others to find their way through this too. That is the most beautiful thing we can do for each other.
Well, and what's neat is that I have my own Shelby Forsythias. I bet you have your own known Wellses.
Sure.
Of like there are people who have gone before, and so I think so much of the work that you and I do is not, hey everybody follow me. It's like, hey everybody, somebody else already walked the path, and it's been happening for years and years.
Yeah.
And so there's this joy and delight in being understood and finding belonging, and I mean, ultimately, so much of the goal of my work is to remind my 21-year-old self is like, you are not alone.
Yeah.
You're going to make it out of this thing alive. And it's not a trite, oh, you're not alone, blah, blah, blah. It's like, there have been others who have gone before. And that was some of the most powerful messaging I received. I mean, it took a while to allow it to come in, and for me to absorb it and even want it to be there. This reminder that you are not alone, but yeah, finding that evidence and then sharing it with other people. It's like there's more. There's evidence that this is possible. to live a life after loss. And even if you don't know how or where to find it, there is hope. Even if you can't see hope as a possibility for your own life, it exists out in the world. And I know that can sound really cheesy and trite, and I probably would have punched you in the face if I heard something like that right after my mom died. But yeah, so much of this work that I do is like, how do we keep researching and delving into this experience in a way that helps us free ourselves and grieve better in a world that still very much disregards the real value of grief.
Yeah. What would you tell someone right now who's listening? And I'd imagine there are a lot of people out there who are feeling, maybe for the first time in their life, collective grief, right? You mentioned it at the top, right? We're in this time of a pandemic, COVID-19. We are in a time of deep, racial unrest. Climate change is destroying our planet. We are maybe at home and we don't have someone to hug. Our jobs, maybe we lost our jobs. Maybe our jobs are different and they're uncomfortable. And we don't have the anchors or the tethers or the comforts that we've built for years, decades, maybe. And you're feeling maybe just a lot of discomfort and loss for normalcy. What would you say to someone right now who's feeling that?
I think probably my first thing is that's real. I think so many times when I sit down with clients, they try to talk themselves out of their grief or acknowledging their grief of like, well, this doesn't matter that much, or it's not as bad as somebody else's, or at least I have a roof over my head, or all these other things. And to say, no, I've lost my job. My routine is upset. My kids are going back to school. I'm concerned about everyone elderly in my life. The West is literally burning. We are having in the middle of one of the biggest civil rights racial uprisings in the United States history that we've seen in over 40 years. And all of that is true. That's real. That's happening. And so even to start from there and be like, you can stop trying to prove yourself wrong or to say that doesn't matter is a really vital first step. And as we kind of talked about a little bit with grief as a long-term partner, it's like allow heartbreak to arrive and stay. And this is a harder thing to do because the temptation, especially societally, is to like, well, and this is comes from our neighbors in the UK also, is keep calm and carry on. Is put your head down, do what you can do what's within your realm of control, and business as usual. But for lack of better phrasing, business as usual's kind of gone out the window. Like that's ship has sailed. We're done with business as usual. And I personally don't think we're going to return to anything that looks like normal. And if you return to anything that looks like normal, whenever coronavirus is quote unquote done, we don't even know if there's going to be an end or some kind of resolution to that. Consider yourself very lucky and very privileged that anything like normal is returning itself to you. Something that I'll add that I'm hearing a lot from people who have grieved, especially who have lost a loved one to death, is welcome to the club. Genuinely, not sarcastically, but a very warm and sad and deep welcome to this club that nobody wants to join, like this grief club. Because something that grieving people know that quote unquote normal or non-grieving people don't know yet, that they're learning now, is that we live in a world where anything can happen. And that means incredible, magical opportunities. And it also means the very worst day of your life. and we don't know what's coming next. And grief is a glaring and constant reminder of that. And so when, especially at the start of this pandemic, when people were freaking out about, well, what's going to happen next? I'm like, I've been asking that question for 7 years. And it's not that I didn't have empathy or sympathy for people who were uncovering this for the first time, because I distinctly remember what it was like to be in that space. And I have had my own stories of that with coronavirus. I lost both of my day jobs, was in some pretty tricky financial straits. My routine was upset. I'm a coffee shop writer, and to lose that was hard. And then at the time, I lived in Chicago, which was a city that faced many of the largest protests, which I attended, but then also turned violent, scary, and we experienced a lot of crackdown by our government as well. And there's a lot of grief in that. Is what is my city turning to? How are we responding to this? And where am I seeing grief in all of these responses too? And gosh, it's a lot to hold. And simultaneously, I'm like, yes, this is grief. All of it. It's true. It's happening. It's real. Like you're not delusional. You're not overreacting. You're not crazy for experiencing everything that you're experiencing right now. And welcome to the club of a very deep knowing that we live in a world where anything can happen.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think people will get a lot out of that answer. Appreciate it. So Shelby, tell me a bit about your book, Your Grief, Your Way.
Yeah. So this is, I think right after my mom died, I was convinced that if I didn't do grief all at once, then I wasn't doing it right, or it wasn't worth doing at all. And Your Grief, Your Way is a non-religious daily devotional for 366 days, because I know that someone's loved one was either born or died on leap year. I insisted on including it with the publisher.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it's these little reminders. It's just a paragraph a day of grief is a long-term relationship. Grief is not all bad. It is possible to integrate a life with grief. And it includes quotes from other grieving people, famous authors, celebrities, and then exercises that I've done with my own clients or even on myself in my grief. And some of them are activities like games that you can turn your grief into so you can see it more often and it normalizes it for you. Or there's other things like journaling prompts or visualizations or meditations. And then there's other things like practical tips for like, how do I clean out my loved one's belongings in a house after they've died? Or how do I handle triggers that come up, especially as we're tilting into October with like Halloween, when people are decorating their yards with caskets and coffins? Like, how do I handle that? And it's so much about, not only do I want to reach over to you and comfort you wherever you are in your grief, but I actually want to give you something of like, you could do this for little or no, usually no, money and very, very little time. And the reason that I wanted this to be such a short collection of condensed and compact pieces of information is because I couldn't read after my mom died. I think this is a common experience for many people who've experienced grief or trauma, is that the ability to focus and concentrate is lost. Usually not irreversibly, but sometimes so. But I couldn't read for about the first 6 months to a year after my mom died. And that is to say, I couldn't keep my focus for very long. And so to have something you can address with your grief or speak to your grief or acknowledge your grief every single day in like a paragraph or less is like, fine, that's as much as I can do. And it makes you feel like you've done something, but in doing something, it is always also doing something to you, which is really neat. So as you are working on your grief is working on you. And it's also not a linear book. So you're not required to start in January and finish in December. You can literally flip it open to any page and find something that will resonate with wherever you are in your grief. And it's like boots on the ground. It's that rock with the rope on it. It's something's keeping you tethered to the earth as you're going through this very ambiguous, amorphous blob experience of everything that grief is. One of my editors just described it as a touchstone. And I'm like, yeah, it's a thing that you can spend just a little bit of time with every day that will ideally comfort or help or assuage you somewhere in your grief that you can return again to tomorrow. It's very low touch. It's very non-committal. And at the same time, I put all these exercises, all these quotes in there that were like, this is what gave me power or peace of mind as I was navigating the death of my mom. So it's like, here's a lot of power and not a lot of paper space or mental space. And hopefully it will do what I wanted after my mom died when I was 21. Again, I'm writing books for myself, not always for other people. I never wrote this in the book, but this sensation of you're going to make it out of this because other people have made it out of this and you're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is amazing. I got to sort of page through it, and I think it's very accessible. I think because there are so many different, I'll back up for a second. When I think about empathy, for instance, it is a concept that is sometimes heavy, right? It's like, what is that? Or I have this narrow idea around what is empathy, and this is what it means. And I think we take empathy for granted a lot. And when I teach about empathy, or I do workshops on empathy, or when I talk about empathy, it is a thing that we can learn through so many different facets and mediums. We can access empathy through yoga, through writing, through conversation, right? Through whatever it may be, through art, right? And that's what I love about Your Grief, Your Way, I think it's important to be sort of myriad and painterly with the way that we can access these healing points. And you give such a variety, and I think it's going to help a lot of people because of that.
Yeah, and kind of the fun of this is that there's a quote and an exercise every other day. So they alternate throughout the whole book for 366 days. And one of the funnest parts of me for this is pairing each quote with an exercise. And that wasn't necessarily that was required of me, but I was like, if they're going to share a page together, they should be related in some way. And so pairing quotes about grief triggers with an entry about what do I do on Halloween when I'm triggered by coffins, caskets, skeletons, decor, movies, anything else that comes up on that day, was a really neat experience. And so essentially there's there's over 130, 170, my math is not great. Whatever 366 is divided by 2, 180 something, different access points for your grief. There's a lot of different ways that you can sneak in through the back door and learn to integrate grief into your life.
Love it. You'll get to plug all your things at the end, but before we wrap up, we always talk about our empathy heroes on this show, Shelby. So these are the people in our lives who are tremendously empathetic. They could be people we know. They could even be characters from stories we love or movies, whatever it may be. I will name my empathy hero this week. First, to give you a moment to think about yours, my empathy hero this week is my friend Jennifer Lynn, who is an illustrator. She's a mom and she's a friend. And recently we've been chatting because we're working on a potential project with an organization that could be coming soon. That's very exciting. And we're also going to be on a panel at Podcast Movement on mental health and podcasting.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's Podcast Movement virtual, which isn't as exciting, but I'm excited. And it'll be good to talk about how, like, the crossover of like how mental health is impacted by podcasting and vice versa. And Jennifer has just been, I don't know, just such a supportive, lovely presence throughout that conceptualization of that pitch that I sent Podcast Movement. And I'm excited about this new thing that we're working on that I can't speak to yet, but she's just such a joy. And it's funny because I think we're a good pairing in that I do have like this, this ethos sometimes of like fatalism and punk rock ethos, and she is like bubbly and sweet, and I think we pair well. So I'm really grateful that she's in my life, and that's why she's my empathy hero this week.
I love that. Well, sometimes I'm always amused by the like comic strips on Instagram that you see of like friendships between introverts and extroverts, and one's always like got a hoodie on and the other one's like sunshine and candy, and I'm like, oh my god, that's really funny.
Yeah.
And so I love when feely humans appear as if they are opposites in some way, but then actually end up joining forces to create something really cool.
Totally.
Let's see. I think the person right now who's my empathy hero is actually a former client of mine, so I will not say her name on the air. But she's a person for whom, when I talked about earlier, there was a difference between feeling and knowing. I was hesitating to say that because as she feels, she knows. Like her intuition, I think, is just so strong and so powerful that she is aware of what's happening in a room almost, I think, before anybody else is. And she uses that information for good. You know, sometimes people read rooms and they're like, okay, how can I like screw everything up?
Yeah.
Or cause drama or make people feel like they don't belong. And she is very much the opposite. She has a heart that aches to create belonging. I think because in so much of her life, there was not space for her to belong. And that's as much as I can say and will say about our relationship together. This is a past client turned friend also. So that's gone a little more of a casual relationship than we are currently in partnership together. But I will say this for all the clients that I work with is I find something I really dearly, truly love in each of them. And it's not a romantic love. It's not even, I love you because you're here and you're paying attention to me and my work, because that would be very egocentric. But in working with people and their grief stories and seeing what they're afraid of and seeing what scares them and seeing the things that they ache for or the things that they're wrestling with, gosh, I just developed this really deep love. And I suppose you could also call it an appreciation for like, wow, look at us all being humans together. Again, it goes back to that wonder of like, look how much more there is here in you and me and us together. Because, you know, when you come into a relationship with another person, you're always creating a third thing, which is the relationship itself. There's the two humans, and then there's also the third human, quote unquote, which is the relationship itself. And gosh, I just have so much admiration for how she shows up in the world. She cares so intensely about who is taking up space and where and why and how we can make it so that everyone is included. And that's especially right now, something that I'm literally letting my shoulders down right now because it's such a beautiful and powerful vision that she has.
Yeah, sounds like a true empathy hero. I love it. Well, Shelby, where can the listeners out there connect with you, read Your Grief Your Way, and all of that loveliness?
Yes. So I will not complicate things more than they need to be complicated. Literally everything I do, podcast, workshops, books, one-on-one, even just to contact and say hello, it's all at shelbyforsythia.com.
Lovely. Well, friend, thank you for being a part of this. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. I really enjoyed listening to you. As I listen to you, I feel, I don't know, like you seem like, I mean, you're so well-spoken. I feel like I'm blathering all over the place. You're so well-spoken.
Me too. And I'm glad to know it's mutual.
It makes me feel like I'm listening to an NPR podcast. It's gentle on my ears. It just feels good. So I appreciated all of this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really sweet. I think perpetually for podcasters, we have this fear of like, am I just going on and on as we're watching the waveforms go by? It's like, it's going on and on. I think it's me. Oh, but no, I so enjoy time with you. And I love, gosh, just everything you're doing with Feely Humans Collective and You Me Empathy and just really raising that flag in the world Gosh, we need so many more of them, and I'm so glad yours exists.
No, thank you. And to you listeners, I always say this, and I'm going to say it again. It's I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this overwhelming, awe-inspiring, pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.